Sorry about that, everyone. So I wanted to say, we have a very mixed audience at the business conference. And fundamentally, what product strategy is about bringing business and technology together and thinking about what is right for sustainable business and what is right for digital public good, because we're an open source foundation. And so this word co-opetition comes up a lot when you put lots of people together who fundamentally have the same aligning beliefs, but they still need to create sustainable business. And so here in the room today, I have two of our key hub operator vendor technology players in Motorbox and in Sybrin. But I also have a parallel community, Mifos. Ed runs the Mifos digital public good community as well, and has also been on this journey of how do you get people collaborating around open source. And I thought it's a very interesting way for us to bring to the conversation this mix of business and tech today. So this word co-opetition that we use a lot, cooperatively compete is fundamentally what's going on. And Ed, I wanted to throw the question to you first. Why co-opetition? What is the value to the community and the members of the community itself?
Well, first off, thanks, Leslie Ann, for inviting me to be on the panel. And that definitely is like a mouthful of a cooperatively competing word. So I think just to provide a little more context, like you said, so Mifos, we've been involved with the Mojo Loop community really on the edge, like helping to connect TFSPs through our payment hub. But I wanted to share some of the experience that we've had over the past 10 to 15 years, like building out more of an ecosystem of fintech players. And we really operate sort of on a different spectrum, but I think a lot of the experiences that we have can be shared with the community. So we provide a set of open source core banking building blocks that really enable edge around innovation at the account and app layer. But like I said, there's shared lessons learned there. And for us, we've really seen, the benefits of and the value of co-opetition really centers around, two main objectives. One, the viability and value back to the community itself. And then secondly, back to those actual commercial players in the ecosystem themselves as well. So in order for, Mojo Loop as a community and a project to really be self-sustaining, as Warren, I think, noted in the, last networking session, there needs to be that upstream contribution model. And then secondly, there needs to be that room and incentive for those commercial players in the ecosystem to be able to innovate, differentiate, and compete and offer services on top of the platform. So we all know, that it's very good to get volunteer contributions, and all of the funded contributions that have been coming from sponsors to help Mojo Loop is critical. But really the end game is to get those players that are commercially invested in using the platform, implementing it, building on top of it, to actually have the incentive to contribute back and cooperate in a competitive or compete in a cooperative manner. So.
And actually, because we got this mix of actors at the business conference, not everyone's a technologist, not everyone's been involved with open source before. So you use that word upstream. Just unpack that word for me a little bit, what you mean there. We also come across the word fork quite a lot. So just unpack those two words a little bit for us in terms of what.
Yeah, and I'm not a technologist, but really like Upstream's being on that latest version of the open source community code base. And so we've seen, a challenge as well as an opportunity in our community of getting those implementers to not go off and be on fork versions where they basically take, an older version of the code base, they're extending it, enhancing it, and then it's difficult for them to go back to the upstream version, which makes them miss out on all the benefits of future changes the community is going to be able to make. And it also prevents the community from sharing in potential changes that they might want to make in the future. So does that help to cover a little bit?
It does, right? It's that fundamental conversation, right? Okay, you've just decided to consume Mojo Loop, use Mojo Loop in your hub operator solution. And if you choose to adapt it, are you going to kind of go off on your own stream, or are you going to kind of stay aligned with the center and therefore as a consequence benefit from what comes down the road from others in the community as well? So I wanted just to kind of make sure that we're clear what we mean when we say these things, because I know there's a mix of audience today. So to Warren and Greg, therefore, why does it make sense for your organizations to cooperatively compete? Any thoughts?
Hit that first one. You want me to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Look, there's always overlap between companies, right? You're always going to compete to a certain level, but we all bring different skills, abilities, different things that we're good at, different things we may have available right now. So it creates a more powerful ecosystem, but we have to contribute back in order to keep that base going strong. If the core Mojo Loop with its core functionality is not good enough, then frankly, our products that sit alongside that aren't going to be good enough. We all look a little bit different. We all have different products. We compete in different ways. We have different profiles as a company, if you will. Sybrin, if somebody wants a company that's been around for 30 years and sits in Africa and knows the space, incredibly well, and that's what they're comfortable with, they're comfortable with us. So everybody's going to look a little different, and we're certainly going to have different products.
Super. Warren, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, for us, we certainly look a lot different, I think, to Sybrin, which is a far bigger and beefier and mature organization. There's strength in shared vision, shared understanding. When I was young, I always used to think my first idea was great and that was going to change the world. As I've gotten older, I've realized that actually, if I share my first idea with people and I talk about it, I can actually challenge it. And before I invest too much time in it, I'm challenging it and I'm refining it, and I'm getting something that's really good at the end of it, which is not what I thought of. And I think having this diversity in the community makes a big difference and helps us. So
people who really think about payments every day are quite a breed.
Yeah. It's nice. You're literally working with some of the best and some of the brightest. You certainly can't afford to bring all those type of people into your own organization. So it's by working with the greater community, you spread yourself farther, you grow more. And like Warren says, you get, new ideas and new ways to new thoughts on how to innovate from it.
Mm-hmm. Super. So there's also a life cycle to this co-opetition model, and Mojo Loop is kind of on a journey. Where we started life, 2016 as level 1 project, but only a year ago became Mojo Loop the open source community. And I wanted to get your thoughts, Ed, on that life cycle of open source projects, what you've seen the life cycle is.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And I think with Mifos, we've got a pretty interesting journey that we've gone on. So we really started out as a formal open source project in 2006. And then I don't think we really, started our journey around co-opetition until the second generation of our software. So we really struggled with that first generation for the first 5 years in building out much of a third-party ecosystem. But then in 2013, when we launched, the second generation of Mifos with a full API to enable an ecosystem, that's where we started to have more of that competition occur. But I think what's critical, in getting to that first stage of co-opetition is making sure, as I think Warren and Greg noted, that there is that sufficient foundation and that sufficient base to really convince stakeholders that there's enough value in the technology itself and the community there to want to begin to cooperatively compete. And then in our case, once we had that sufficient foundation and base, we really started to see an uptick in contribution. But then I think as the functionality in the base grows and it becomes more core and robust, the boundary of where, there is a playing field to compete and cooperate starts to get smaller as more of the innovation moves to the edge. And I think you will, naturally see the rate of co-opetition to go down. And at that point, I do think, there's an opportunity to help the nature of co-opetition evolve, where co-opetition becomes, less around core feature innovation and more around ongoing maintenance and development of the platform itself. So I do think there is this natural, life cycle where it takes a little while to build up that base to enable upstream contribution. It then peaks, and then naturally it's going to, start to flow as the product becomes more mature. Yeah, and then there's more innovation on the edge. So, but it would be good to hear, what Warren and Greg think about, where Mojo Loop is in this life cycle of co-opetition and how, they can grow further. So,
you want to throw some thoughts in there, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I still think we're early on, right? We need some more players involved. We're certainly getting things done and moving along nicely, but it would be nice to have more folks involved. There are pieces that we still need to contribute to the base. There are another next level evolutions already that we're on, right? I mean, the cross-border component needs to be at the next level, for example. So we're going to tackle that.
So there's a call to action there, right, guys? I heard you say we want to do some of this stuff, and actually, if there are payments professionals out there that want to be involved in making Moduloop next generation, that really we are open doors and really want to kind of people to come find us. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's plenty to do. I don't think we're going to get bored in this space very, very soon. A lot of stuff that we all want to get done. We've got our focus areas. I know Motorbox has their focus areas. We probably need a lot of others with them as well. But the reality is that we've got to create the right environment for people to come and spend time in our community and really dig in and do. So Ed, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more also about this. How do we create an environment that enables competition? What does that environment look like? And I think you'd spotted some key trends that we wanted to try and unpack together. Do you want to kind of summarize for them the trends that we've seen?
Yeah, like a real high level summary, because by no means do I think I'm an expert on this, as we've been going through the challenges I've noted. But I think there's sort of like 4 trends or takeaways I could make, and I think some of them are on like the softer side, and some of them are on a little on the harder side, and hopefully we can cover them today. So I think first off, it's making clear what those incentives are and communicating that out. Having a culture that really enables co-opetition. And then thinking about, how the product architecture itself really defines the boundaries of that cooperative space. And then lastly, once those boundaries have been defined, like what are those processes and policies across the community that can enable and make co-opetition thrive? So.
Super. So let's unpack them one by one. Let's talk incentives first.
So on the incentives, sorry, Leslie Ann.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say really there, I think it's first off, making it clear, as I think both Warren and Greg noted, that there are, incentives to not just like the technical value and the technology of co-opetition, but really those ideas and innovation that can be shared. And so I think this, value is also going to be different for each persona. So I think for Moduloop, it's critical to one, have the notion to actually communicate that incentive, but really boil it down to the specific persona. And as we talked about upstream contribution, it's costly to fork the software and be off of that upstream code base. And then what would be interesting for Moduloop to do, and I think, Glenbrook spoke to some of the studies they're doing, it would be nice to see if there could be some type of total cost of ownership, not just of, building out on open source, but actually this cooperative competition and the value of contributing back. And there's a nice quote, that Paul Ramsey, an open source advocate, gave around upstream contribution in this virtuous cycle, in that, you get what you pay for, everyone gets what you pay for, and you get what everyone else pays for. And I think that helps to, really tangibly communicate those incentives of cooperatively competing. So,
but it's such a different business model for traditional hub operators to think about. So Greg, I'm curious your take on this model, and do you talk about open source as part of your conversation to your customers?
Yeah, it's a major part of what we're saying as how we're positioning ourselves. We're not only positioning as a way to keep the costs down, right? Which obviously it is, but we're positioning it as we're working with kind of the latest, greatest type of thing that is community driven. And then our approach is, as I mentioned the other day, is a little bit different, where we're probably wrapping a lot more of it around some of our proprietary software and things like that. But that's the argument. That's the pitch. Now, the hard part was getting my own organization on board and getting everybody up to speed. So I think most people here have worked with the CTO before. He's going, no, I can build it. It wasn't built by me, not built in my backyard type of thing. So I had to get us over that.
Hold that thought, because that's actually the next section of the question we're going to talk about.
All right.
I'm curious about how you guys decided what you wanted to contribute back and how you got involved in the roadmap. Warren, do you want to talk about kind of your decisions and how you decided where you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, very happy to. Because I think I said on the first day, for us, the big thing is, we do believe in the financial inclusion mission, and we believe that this can make a real meaningful difference in the world. But how do you get this to scale? And actually, it's not even about the hub at the center. I totally get it. And, if you do the maths in 5 seconds, you see, bilaterals doesn't scale. Hub and spoke works well. But all those things have the one same problem, that you actually have to be able to get people participating in the system, not just onboarding, but getting them connected, staying connected, and reducing that ongoing cost. So for us, the point of kind of most impact was helping people who do not have a great core banking product, because there are definitely ones out there which can easily interconnect with the Mojaloop system. And there's some systems, originally Mojaloop had the mobile money core providers actually developed the API even. Uh-huh. So there are systems out there with built-in native support, but there are far more systems without. And, from our history, where Modusbox comes from a system integration history, we could see that this was a particular space where we could have a lot of contribution to. And we have a great vision about the way that should be. We also don't have enough resources in the room to deliver on that vision in a really easy way. So how do we get that there? Well, we've seeded that process with all of our projects. All of our Mojaloop projects have evolved these small components around onboarding and participation. And, that is being rolled up into the payment manager contribution that we've made to the system. We've also got all of the parties we've worked with and the hub operators we've worked with to contribute back the components they've created, whether those have been oracles and aliases and elements of the UX which allow us to demonstrate things better, or are baselines for other people to adopt. So these are things which we just they're not finished. They're not complete. Some of them will never be complete in the open source, I'm sure, because, just time and priorities will draw us.
It's always too much software to build.
Yeah. But the thing is, this way we can actually get help, and we can help everybody else. If Greg has some developers who can spare some time to do something, what I'd hate for him to do is go and do the same thing we've already done. So if we've written a microservice which provides a feature, I want him to write the next microservice on the roadmap, not the one I've already done, right?
Yep.
So,
and fundamentally, that's what we're about. We're about modules and about making sure it works for everybody's business along the way. But fundamentally, we don't run the software as a network itself. It's everybody has their own kind of space to play. But Greg, I'm curious, are you concerned about competition in open Apple areas of focus at all?
I'm not really concerned about that. Again, as I mentioned, there's always going to be overlap, right? You can tell by the gray hair, I've been doing things like this for a little while. I've been in other situations that weren't open source where it certainly had the co-opetition going, non-cartel-like at least, but we all knew each other and worked well together. So yeah, I'm not worried about that. Again, like I said, every company has its different profile. Every customer has what they would like, what they're comfortable with, and frankly, what their own skills are. I expect to see actually a lot more of us all working together in the same project, because we all have different skill sets and bringing more things. That hasn't happened a lot yet, but I do expect to see more. So someone might like us. Like I said, we sit in Africa. We've been in Africa for a long time. We know it really well. Someone might like that, right? We have different product sets. Someone might like the scenario where they want to be able to manage their entire switching layer from one console, one place. We offer that, right? That's something that we offer. So you want to run Mojaloop and run it from within our environment. That's great. You need to run your ACH, you need to do RTGS, etc. You can do that all in one place. So we all have different things, if you will, to add in there.
Yeah. So your customers will probably see quite a different version of Mojaloop to what Modusbox's customers will see, for example.
Yeah, well,
exactly. The UI will look quite different.
Yeah, I mean, we're not rolling out, doing something that is working with somebody that is completely open source, but our model is definitely to use our interface, which is uses our low code application development environment. And then so we want that at the core, where it's very similar to how we're doing the reference architecture, the business process APIs that are being worked on, those types of things. It all consumes that. But obviously our layer on top is going to look different and be different. And that's how we will add value, right? We'll offer our additional services. Do you want what we're doing for Forex and our integration with the Forex providers that we're dealing with? Do you want to, let's say you're a DFSP, but you need to be able to do Swift processing as well.
And so really the conversation for those who want to adopt Modulip when they're talking to the different vendors in the community is that there will be differentiators from different companies. And it kind of depends on the adopter's vision of how greenfield they want to be, and how they are thinking about those kind of value-added services and how they want to acquire them along the way, which is really interesting. So I wanted to move on to the second element of this kind of what creates a good co-opetition environment. And the second one was culture. Ed mentioned culture is really important to get in the right environment. But actually, Ed mentioned it's not just about the culture within the community. And Greg, you brought up a really interesting point there about your CTO.
Oh.
And how actually it's about the need to change the culture inside the companies as much as the culture that we build at the community. Talk to me a little bit about that.
He's still fighting it sometimes. You guys know Roland. Roland's gonna get me now for calling him out. But like any good CTO, right? Him and his people always could have made it better than somebody else. They wouldn't be who they are. They wouldn't be as good as they are if they didn't think that way. So it's a normal tendency. But there is a paradigm shift when you in essence have to realize that the greater community is your partners, and as Warren said, we shouldn't rewrite the same microservice that they've done, right? It's a divvying up all the pieces and making us more efficient. I like the reference that we put out on Tuesday as well. Everything that's built has to have support in it, right? So if it's something that goes into the community, it's supported different. So our support team goes farther, and that's something that everybody is buying into. But at times we sit there and go, we could just do this ourselves. It is a different way of thinking. I mean, we're still learning, and now when we look at everything, we literally go, what should be an open source versus what should we do, and what's the business case for each, and then make the decision, right? So every single decision related to this area is that's how we do it.
Would you reflect the same thing, Warren, at your organization?
Yeah, definitely. Because the contribution isn't just code, it isn't just things. Greg mentioned about some of the business framework work and the bounded context that's happening in the reference architecture work streams. It's actually Sybrin brings a wealth of understanding, and a lot of the value of what Sybrin has actually brought to the community was mature thinking about what a system needs to look like in an end state that helped accelerate. So we didn't have to kind of go through first principles design processes around lots of things. Actually, they came along and said, here's what we think the product needs to be. You need to have these services in the core system so that we can expose those through our front end. These are the things our customers will want. And, just that kind of thinking as well just accelerates the whole process, helps us validate. But we do have to have that question as well. What bit's going to be in open source? What bit's in proprietary?
Which is a perfect segue to actually the next section of this framework that Ed brought to us, which is actually to create the right environment for open source to work. We need the right product architecture, and we need the right boundaries of co-opetition. And we've been talking over the first year of Modulip Foundation about this quite a lot in the product council work. We've been talking about how do we enable the right boundaries, and that what is Modulip is fundamental to that story of how do we create the right boundaries. So let's dig in here a little bit further. Let's start with the theory of defining a product architecture in the open source, and the terms like boundaries of co-opetition Ed, how does the platform and product architecture and the chosen open source operating model influence or enable the kind of co-opetition model from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. So I think this really is key. And so we talked about, this notion of like a base or a foundation. And sometimes, it's referred to like that open core and like defining, what's the thickness of the open core versus what's like the thickness of the thin crust and that proprietary layer, of innovation and value added services that go on top. So I think that's, one like definition of a boundary of the playing field that would be good to establish, primarily through the product architecture. But then I think the other, boundary that's key is where is that, edge of innovation in the marketplace where these additional tools like fraud and risk management, DFSP, onboarding, et cetera. So I think that's another boundary that the community needs to help establish and define. And so within Mifos, like I said earlier, that first generation of our software, I don't think there was any clear boundary of where, people could collaborate and contribute. I think the core, was like a big, massive ball of spaghetti code, and it was difficult to really, one, understand to contribute back, but, where to contribute itself. But then once we moved to more of that API-driven architecture, that boundary became more clear, and it was more around, differentiating through different workflows on top of the software, having different payment integrations in market, having different mobile and web app experiences on top, while leveraging all those core functionalities around maintaining customer accounts, managing a savings and loan portfolio. And then as we went through that, journey of co-opetition, it really changed where that boundary of, co-opetition got smaller and customers, partners started to hold close to their, proprietary systems, more of that innovation that previously would have gone back into the core. So I think we saw, over time that boundary got smaller as like the area for differentiation at the edge, became smaller. So I think it'd be, interesting just to really like start to dig into that, architecture of Moduloop at the core and understand, where Warren and Greg see those, boundaries of co-opetition. And then where Mifos has interacted has been more on the edge around trying to, onboard DFSPs through our payment hub. And now, Moduloop or Modusbox has their payment manager. So I think it'd also be great to talk really around the edge, and it'd be great to hear from the audience too, of where they see those boundaries at both like the core as well as the edge and in the marketplace.
So I think there's two things to unpack there. I think it's very useful to have Modusbox, who've been around historically for the decisions that were made around what's in the core. But also we've got Greg, who had to kind of look at Moduloop and go, well, what is in the core? And is it the right for me? And I'm very curious for you both to unpack those two conversations, if you would. Warren, do you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, so, we've certainly understood in the Moduloop community, that we wanted to be API led, that we wanted to have a modular solution, that we wanted this to be something that could fit into a wider ecosystem, or even just the ecosystem within a switch operator in a country. So that's always been an idea and a concept. But, shall we say, software development, discipline, etc., the need to get stuff done, working from a proof of concept and evolving. As a community, I think it's fair, as we reflect back, that, we got good stuff done, but it wasn't always an ideal evolution in that. And I think now we stand at the cusp of, looking at the reference architecture and say, okay, let's make sure that this thing, which started with lots of people, then went down to a few people being involved, and now is expanding again. Let's make sure that we're actually making it modular throughout, that it's accessible throughout, that we actually have something where it's easy. The coal face is wide and clear, and we know what we're trying to chisel into each part of it. So, or at least we know there's a part we need to chisel, and we get together and talk about what we're going to do with that bit. So it's great to see over the last year the community effort and the contribution that has happened. And even though not all the code that spaghetti ball Ed spoke about, yeah, I feel that. And we feel it even as we help commission components of ModuLoop into different markets. And we totally see the value of kind of pulling that apart and getting that right. So very excited to be part of that initiative. And the big thing that's happened this year is not that the spaghetti ball's been unpulled, but that I think everybody that is contributing in the community is now thinking in that bounded context way, and we're thinking about it modular, top to bottom, and that is powerful.
Greg, do you want to throw in some of your thoughts?
Oh, I guess I should
break in.
Yeah, I should tell you how cautious we were at breaking in. We had looked into ModuLoop for a couple months. I kind of created the idea of how we could maybe work with it and leverage it. And some folks in the community will remember that Roland and I flew out to London because we wanted to see how real this was. We didn't tell you our underlying sneaky mission, if you will. So we met everybody, liked everybody, liked what was going on and what was being said. And we did like the API first scenario. We thought we could add value around that. We in particular liked, as we looked at it, we felt the community could use us. We felt we'd be of benefit to the community. So we saw how we would fit in, and frankly, with co-opetition, right? How we would fit in. Obviously, we knew there's competition in there, but we felt we could bring different focuses and work on different things. So that's kind of how we were seeing it. But I agree with the bounded context scenario and working on the reference architecture. Really like where the new reference architecture, like where that's going, and what we're kind of how we're evolving all this. So do see a lot of progress in those types of things, and feel it's easier for us to figure out where we fit in and what parts we work with.
Contribute in a particular area of the product, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm also quite excited to see what we're doing around the edge tools. So we obviously, you're both running hubs, and hubs are at the center of financial inclusion, because if we don't get running hubs, we don't ever get customers and participants connected to each other via ModuLoop kind of protocol. And so we've been very focused on that, but we've also been focused on participation. How do we get as many DFSPs connected as quickly as possible? And we think that this is a big part of our product strategy and product value proposition, because we're able to drive down the cost of what it takes to get an MFI or a small telco or a neobank connected into the rails as first-class citizens. And we're really hoping that we'll start to build community around some of these edge tools as much as around the hub software itself and the APIs, and which I think is very exciting to think about as we move into the 2022 roadmap a little bit more. But we've also talked a little bit there about the anti-roadmap and the fact that we don't want, just like Lucy said in the DPGA session yesterday, we also are do no harm. We've got to figure out how do we play our role in the ecosystem and create the right processes and policies to enable the right things to happen. And a big part of our conversation there is around that healthy discussion around product architecture. Ed, you've had some interesting exposure to this in the Mifos community. Do you want to throw any more thoughts in there?
Yes, so thanks for bringing up that notion of anti-roadmaps. I think this goes back to communication as well as culture. But I think within the Mifos community, we wanted to have like those commercial players, clearly understand that there is a roadmap and an anti-roadmap, and that the community believes it's healthy for there to be proprietary features and other, solutions built on top. Because as Warren and Greg, I think both noted, that's the only way for long-term sustainability. And I think there also has to be this notion, it's not just like differentiation at the technology layer, but as Greg noted, around commercial support on top. So we've been very, deliberate of having like our, commercial players in the ecosystem clearly delineate, what they're working on and how it falls into a roadmap that goes into the commons, and then an anti-roadmap, which is a set of, their secret sauce or perhaps something that's so unique to their market that it wouldn't be of value to others. But I think it's valuable for them to go through this exercise of, defining the roadmap and anti-roadmap, but I think also, valuable in helping to, to share this view of how they see the overall, market, product, et cetera, with other players in the ecosystem. So,
and reflecting back that concept of anti-roadmap, Warren and Greg, would you say that's something that you've been thinking about internally in your companies?
Yeah. Again, what makes sense to be in the main product and what doesn't, and what makes sense to, for us to do and drive. The merchant side of things is so vast and so deep, right? So at what level do we need just the ability to connect this and do certain things at a minimum? But if you will, that's just enabled in the framework, like through PISP, let's say. And that lets anybody else with the merchant capability that's right for the area bring that in. That's something we're going to be focusing on. So
you've brought up a really interesting area where we're in the discovery process inside the Modular Community Minute around this anti-roadmap and roadmap for merchants. We're deep in the conversation of merchant lifecycle management and how far do we go as a centralized service, and also the concept of to get QR code interoperability in merchants where you can go travel to any country and spend money by snapping a QR code. What is involved in a centralized world and what really should be edge components? And I would also say that there's a real call to action here for anyone that watches this presentation to say, if you are thinking about what might be commodity and what might be differentiated features for a really thriving merchant ecosystem, we have the workstream for you. So please come join us and have a think about that in the open, because what we want to do is do the right things for our community in that space. That's my little advertisement slot for our road mapping work. But yes, exactly that. It's understanding where is the boundaries, and we think a lot about this in the product council kind of work that we do together in the various work streams. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've got the last 5 minutes. What are the key takeaways, guys, that you would say from this conversation you want to land with everyone who's here today and also might watch the playbacks?
I think for me, the key thing is please, if you think, even if you're just thinking about it, just reach out to the community. There's lots of people. There's a very active community on Slack. There's lots of ideas going around, very open to having that conversation with you. So get involved and you'll find people interested in what you have to say. And for anybody who does embark on a program and actually start adopting it or running it, talk to all of us, talk to Motorsbox, talk to Greg, talk to Crosslink, talk to everybody in the community, put a general thing out there and see what we can do. Because one of the great things about this is we have to be honest, right? There's no hiding the good or the bad or the ugly, because it's all out in the open. So we can tell you, if you tell us what you're doing, we can tell you we're going to have trouble. And then please think about, what you do, putting it back into the center, because that way we will all grow stronger. I really like that quote that Ed shared with us. It really is like that. We will get much further down this road together.
Say it again, Ed. That quote was actually genius.
Yeah, you get what you pay for. And what's Paul Ramsey said, you get what you pay for. Yeah. Everyone gets what you pay for, and you get what everyone else pays for. So yeah, I think just Greg, do you want to go first or?
Go ahead.
No, I was just I think, to echo, what Warren said, I think it does come down to, the willingness of the ecosystem participants to want to, collaborate. But I also think, from the Moduloop community perspective, I think should be very, deliberate and explicit in communicating and signaling, these incentives and value of like this cooperative competition, because I do think, especially around the edge, there's not just the existing players that could be further, motivated to do it. But I think especially around the edge can attract a lot of new players to the ecosystem if they see, there's this opportunity, to innovate and provide all these services around the core platform itself. And there really is this room to, have commercial growth and sustainability on top of an open core. And I think the last piece is, I think my perspective from the Mifos side, we need to do better at practicing what we preach. So I think from the perspective of DFSP operational tools, like we need to do a better job, like with Warren and the Modusbox team around what we've done with Payment Hub to align that with Payment Manager to have, and define what really is that common, boundary and cooperative space around the DFSP onboarding tools. Because I think to date, we've developed some stuff that's sort of been duplicative of each other, and it would be good to identify a core roadmap there and how we build out collectively around that. So, but thanks, Lizzie. Looking forward to your closing thoughts, Greg's.
It's basically to reiterate that last part you said. There's room for everybody, right? So if you sit back and look, you'll find a place for yourself. Sure, some of it'll be duplicative. That a bit of that is normal, but let's all work to try to not do that and as much as we can. But you'll find your niche. There's definitely space in this product set, in this community. It's growing. It's still, if we were a bell curve, not sure where we would be, but we're still in the early stages. There's a lot of room to go up towards the top.
And I would add one of the quotes that I heard Nat from Visa cite earlier. Things become real when you roll up your sleeves. So by coming in and not just looking at the edges, you will really understand your place and understand if there is a viable, sustainable model for what you do in the world and how you can be part of the story. So come find us. The team have put some links in the chat to find out basically what is Modulip, the core roadmap and what's going on. And also a Slack channel. We hang out in Slack quite a lot as a community. You can normally find somebody to answer questions on the product side, but also on the kind of deep tech, how to get things run inside. So please do come join us. And I'll hand at that moment back to Simeon.